Let's talk about Gnosis. Okay, so tonight we're talking about tarot card number 13. Death. You know? What is it in The Simpsons where they talk about, where they do a tarot reading and it's like, Lisa's doing a tarot reading and they pull out the fluffy bunny card. She's like, oh no, it's a horrible card. It's a horrible card. Yeah. And then it's like, oh, and then they pull out death. Oh, don't worry, it just means change or something like that. You know what I mean? Anyway. So death, a very interesting card. Okay, yeah, in a sense, yeah, it means change. But, well, it actually just means death. It's kind of weird they call it immortality. It's kind of an awkward sort of situation. It is immortality. But it's death and rebirth. You know, death implies the complete end of something and then the beginning of something else, if you understand what I mean. To the complete finishing of a process and then the beginning of a process, if you know what I mean. The finality of a process. So like something actually finishes completely when it dies. That's very important. Do you understand what I mean? So as opposed to like, something, as opposed to something sort of becoming another, we're talking about the complete finishing of one process so another process can begin. You understand what I mean? Death and rebirth. That's why it's interesting in Gnosis we talk about the death of the ego, because it's completely finishing, not like the recategorizing of the ego or the moving the ego around or thinking differently about the ego or accepting your ego or loving your ego. It's the death of the ego. Yeah. So basically, we're going to talk a bit about death, but we actually gave Mishy's a Life and Death Part 2, which has a very similar thing. But I remember when we talked about that, I said, we started talking about psychological death. I said that we talk about that another time because it's not so much to do with it. Whereas this card is the other way around. So we're mentioning the 3 types of death, but we're actually going to go really into the psychological death, as opposed to on Monday where we went into the physical and second death. We really want to talk about psychological death. Okay, so before we do that, let's look at the card. It's quite a simple card, this one. There's a nice little picture here. You have between the lilies, yeah, you have like a pathway that leads to, in other words, it's like the pathway that leads into the internal worlds is through death. Do you know what I mean? Because you have this little arch made up of lilies, which is the flower of death. And then it's like the pathway to actually reach the superior worlds is through the death. Yeah. Here in the middle of the plate, you have the man harvesting the wheat, which is an alchemical symbol to some degree as well, which is sort of, I guess, the more sexual side. I didn't write that down. But the wheat that is ripe here, the sexual values that are ripe are ready and taken down. But more than that, it's really got to do, of course, with death. Yeah, with the reaping of the wheat is the symbol of the death of the eye. You have the little virtues growing through here, 3 aspects here, the little virtues growing out of the sexual waters. That's what flowers usually represent. These ones represent death because they're the lilies, but these ones represent the virtues growing out of the death of the ego. So when, I guess to put it simply, I said this before, but it's very important in Gnosis that if you want to, how do I put this? The way to create virtue is through death. Yeah, virtue is not created through imitation. You can't imitate virtue. It doesn't really work that way. You like someone's virtue and you try. That's why all this kind of like, what's it like? What do they? Does it TED Talks? What do they call that? Like when Tony Robbins, all these sort of guys. There's a term for that. The big talks that they give, the self-help seminars. Yeah, all that sort of stuff. It's not, it doesn't really work because the person's not, they're trying to gain a virtue that they don't have. So they're trying to imitate another person's virtue. I'm not saying I don't mean it doesn't work entirely, but I mean like, it's not the same as actually creating that virtue or liberating that virtue out of the ego. Yeah. See, for a virtue to really come, it's like the virtue we have is trapped within the ego. So if I have, for instance, within my anger is trapped force, within my lust is trapped love, within my pride is the trapped humility. Prior to that ego, the true virtue comes out. And so all of those things really are just sort of working with the personality. That's all they're really doing. So all these sort of big talks, et cetera, is about moving the personality. And, the problem with that is that, well, we saw what happened in Germany when they tried to do that. When you try to change the entire world without dying on the ego, where the Germans decided that they had the best way of doing absolutely everything, and they tried to impose that upon the world. And it didn't go so well, is it? And I'll tell you, I'd say the main defect that they had, let's strip away everything else and all these other things, is that they tried to get their way without working on the ego. You know what I mean? They weren't working on the ego. These guys weren't working on the I. They thought they had the best way. We can make the best cars, we can do the best things, and we should share that with everyone, forcibly. But again, if the people were working on the ego, then the real virtue comes out. And otherwise we just spend our time comparing ourselves to other people. This isn't real virtue. So that's what he's saying. The real virtues are born through the death of the ego. When the ego dies, real virtue comes out, yeah, or real virtue is born, yeah. The true virtue comes from the death. That's very important. Everything else is just personality work. But the majority of our world is personality work. That's what everyone's doing in all the different schools and everything. When they take you to school, it's all personality work, yeah? Which doesn't really go anywhere because then they die and then that's it, It's also not real virtue. That's sort of the issue you find with a lot of religious organizations. They try to create virtue, but often in doing so, if the person doesn't already have that virtue, they just end up stifling themselves or becoming quite repressed or becoming quite, upset, or the virtue is imitated, but in such a way that the person just ends up giving a false virtue. That's why when a person who expresses real virtue knows how to express it, if you understand what I mean. It's not like they have a handbook. This is this, be happy here, be generous here, be this. But when a person who naturally expresses virtue knows how to express it, whereas a person who doesn't, when they don't know what to do, you know what I mean? They sort of like find themselves trying to revert to the virtue, but it's just clunky and weird. So like, oh, I guess I should be charitable right now. Here, take this knife. What do you mean? Because this man, he asked for a knife so he could stab someone, and Jesus said we should always give everyone anything. And he said if someone wants your shirt, give them your jacket. So he asked for my knife, so I also gave him a gun. It sounds crazy, but that is actually sort of the way of thinking. Yeah, what you say? Okay. All right. Okay. So that's just important. So the real virtues are born of sexual energy, and they also come from the death. The true virtue, real virtue. Yeah. As I said, I'm not saying you can't do something with the personality, but I'm just saying the real virtue. That's where it's going to come from. The real change. Yes.
So, do you think that like the virtue that someone it's natural? It's actually a natural state. They're not necessarily going, "Oh, I'm going to use this virtue." It's just actually a natural state, like the virtue properly, not the imitated one. That's like
yeah, true virtue. You don't have to think about it.
You're not really thinking, "Oh, here."
No, like you're in your own virtues. Someone else will help you. Just go, "Oh, yeah, I'll give you a hand." No problems, mate. You're not going, "Well, it is the right thing to do now, but I don't like him." You just go, "Yeah, sure." It's like it's natural. Someone so there are virtues we do naturally. Like that someone asks you for help. Most of the time, you want to do it because you have virtue. Do you know what I mean? Like if someone asks you, I don't know, like a friend says, "Oh, could you give me a lift?" Or could you do this? You go, "Oh, yeah, sure, that's virtue." But then as we expand that virtue, it can then move into more areas. The problem is it's contesting with the ego, which makes it hard. So everyone's happy to help until the ego comes involved. You understand what I mean? Yeah.
I notice myself, it's like a lag effect. Like I won't know that I'm coming from an unauthentic place of virtue until I'm halfway in. Like I'm offering and extending and supporting, and then I start getting resentful.
Yeah.
And then kind of internally realizing I never actually was coming from a genuine sense of virtue in what I was giving. I was actually just trying to role model a virtue instead of actually coming from a virtue. Like
that's right.
And it just tends to feel frustrated or transactional. Like I kind of feel like that person needs to give me something back.
Yeah, it's in Gnosis we call that self-love, where I give love, but I demand the return. I give something, but also back. I'll try putting this on 2. Give me a second. Just a little bit. I actually upped the speed because they were making noise earlier, so I'm going to slightly drop it. Still nice because it's kind of a warm night, but we'll see. Yes, that's right. That's right. Anyway, it's tricky. You know, there is a level. Obviously, we can't stop imitating virtue. It's just the reality. We're going to do that. But as I said, the real virtues, the true virtues, are born of the death. That's all I wanted to say. Okay, so moving on. These are 3 types of death. The physical death, which is when we die, the cord is broken. So we have our physical body here. We have our physical body here, like that. We have the vital body that exists just about an inch out around the physical body, whose anatomy is mixed with the physical, but without becoming is with the physical body without becoming mixed up. And then you have the astral body. And when we die, the essence and the ego, because they are unfortunately mixed, leave in the astral body because this silver cord or antakarana is cut. The antakarana is cut. And then, as you said, this vital body and this physical body, they both die. And we talked about this before. And same with the personality. Our personality dies as well. It goes to the grave. The personality is what we refer to as ghosts. If the personality, not always, but sometimes the personality hangs around, you know, like the old mum who won't leave the house. You know what I mean? Because she's still there, living the same thing, claiming all the cupboards. Yeah, so the physical body dies, which can take whatever, however long to decompose. It's best to burn it so you don't have to worry about it for too long. And the vital body can take weeks, depends, to sort of begin to dissipate, and then it's all done. Now, I just want to add this thing. It's interesting that Samael says the Divine Mother has to approve of that process. I thought that was quite interesting. So the angels of death can't actually sever that cord, because that's what they do. They cut that cord. That's their job. They sever that cord. They can't do that without the prior approval of our Divine Mother. It's quite interesting. So one part of so in other words, the will of the being is always considered being to being. Yeah. And so the antakarana is cut. The physical goes on, and then after that process, when we die physically, as he said, our essence, and our ego dressed in the astral body will then pass into the internal worlds. And then there'll be a moment where we can choose. This is what we talked about earlier in the week. That not choose. Sorry, there's a judgment, and either we're going to return immediately to reincarnate straight away. We're going to go to the superior worlds if we have dharma or good karma. And so we're going to go up and have a little bit of time off. So as it were, hence all of the heavens described in all the different religions of the world. Where the ego is left at the door, or we're going to go through the process that's called the second death. And the second death is where, in our planet, our dress in our astral body, we enter into the interior of the planet, within the Earth's crust. And this is the abyss, or it is the second death. And the second death is where all of the ego is stripped off us because we didn't do it ourselves. Yeah. So we had all that ego, we created ego, that's a reality, we were irresponsible, we created desire. It was described to me beautifully once when I was younger, that it was described as, it was when I was 17, I had that experience that, I actually asked internally, why is it that it happens that way? Why is it we go through the second death? And then I felt the presence of the master of the tribunal. I didn't actually explain that very well on Monday because it was a really weird experience. I was in the shower, and this is a really weird experience. I was in the shower physically, and I was just thinking about it, and I was like washing my hair, and I was like really concentrating. I was like, why is that? Why do we go through the second death? And then it was the weirdest experience. I felt myself almost like jinn. It wasn't jinn, but it felt like jinn. Suddenly I was just the master of the law was all around me. Like my eyes were closed, and like it was like astral. They were just all there, just like and then they just said to me, they said, if a young man doesn't clean his room, who cleans his room? Like if a boy doesn't clean his room, who cleans it? Oh, mum cleans it. And they go, this is the same process. In other words, if you don't die in your ego, nature will dissolve it for you. Mother Nature, as you are on this planet, the Earth is like the mother of a physical body in a way. Yeah. Then the process of nature through the inferior realms of nature will actually dissolve it for us. That's the second death. So that term or phrase actually comes from Dante Alighieri. Yeah, he talks about the souls in the abyss yearning for the second death. Yeah, and Samael uses that term again, yearning for the second death. Those who exchange their birthright for a plate of lentils. Yeah, the fornicators of the abyss. Everybody who goes, and so that's not a place of constant damnation. That's literally just a place where, after you finish your 108 lives, you go into the interior of the earth, and then you come out clean as a completely free essence once again. So even if you stuff it all up, Mum will do it, sort it out for you. But it's going to take a long time because you lived 108 lives, right? You're going to have to relive all that ego and have it stripped off you slowly and painfully. So it takes thousands of years. That process is really long. So you don't really want to do it. What you want to do is this: the psychological death. The psychological death is marvelous. It is the most important thing is that it is the first factor of the Gnostics. It used to be the second. True story. Samael used to have the order of the factors listed like this: birth, death, sacrifice, meaning alchemy, psychological death, sacrifice. But due to the hard work of the South Americans of the early Gnostic movement, he reorganized those factors so that it would be psychological death first, most important, then alchemy, then sacrifice. Do you know why that is? Because of their hard work of not working on the ego and their extreme work on the alchemy and getting all sorts of faculties and awakening all these capacities ruined and almost destroyed the entire movement. And none of these guys got anywhere because they didn't die. And it's interesting here in this card, it shows you that death is the way. Yeah, death is the way of the path. Yeah, you walk through the entrance of death to get into the superior worlds. So he reorganized it because he realized people weren't dying. That's why you read Samael's books and it's all about the alchemy up until 1974, around 5, and then everything changes because he realizes that people weren't dying. That even though you do need the alchemy, without the death, is no point. Yeah. So it's very, 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 very important. And there's been many people trying to teach in different ways. It's complicated learning it. Samael talks about it really beautifully in Revolutionary Dialectic, Revolutionary Psychology to a degree. Revolutionary Psychology, he's showing how to die, but he doesn't give the exact nuts and bolts of how to do it until Revolutionary Dialectic, where he explains it very, very well. And so this process actually comes from an experience of, experience was actually from Osmond Enriquez being told by Raphael Arape's being. So it is kind of Raphael Arape, kind of someone else. It's a hard experience. But if you go and read in Samael's book, Revolution Dialectic, he gives a 5-step process for the elimination of the ego, and it is very, very close. It's almost exactly the same. This is just much easier to describe. Samael says observation, comprehension, dissolution. If you find it, that's how he explains the death of the ego. Observation, comprehension, dissolution. That's how he explains it. And these two extra factors, this was added by an experience that someone had internally. Yeah? And I think it's important because it helps us to understand this process. These sort of are a part of, these are the bridges that take you from observation to comprehension and from comprehension to real dissolution. In a sense, you could easily leave them out, but if you're doing this properly, you will do these in between naturally. You understand what I mean? So this is pretty important. I'm going to teach you. This is how you die. Yeah? Even though in the beginning, mostly of what we do is just this. You understand? We spend most of our time just doing this because the death of the ego is actually extremely difficult. But at the same time, we must do the process. So let me explain for you. I'll use an internet first, actually. I don't think this is on the net. Let me explain the process of how to meditate on an ego properly. Yeah. This is what's called structural analysis. In fact, I should have written it down. This is what we call structural analysis. I don't know how it's spelled properly, but you can deal. Structural analysis. Samael talks about this. Again, he talks about this in Revolution of the Dialectic. He says that there is structural analysis and transactional analysis. We're not going to talk about transactional analysis tonight. Transactional analysis is the relationship that egos have with each other. So, for instance, you are angry, but the real reason you're angry is because of your pride. That's a transaction. So we need to, at some point, begin to understand how the egos work together. For instance, what you will find that often pride is the ego paying for other egos. It's the ego that has the force and the power, and it puts other ones in front. In other words, it's like it's the ego bankrolling the other ones. It's the one putting up the force. In other words, you wouldn't get nearly as angry if there wasn't so much force in your pride. You wouldn't be nearly as sad if there wasn't so much force in your pride. You wouldn't be nearly as embarrassed. You wouldn't be nearly as envious if you didn't have so much energy in your pride. So the pride is actually the big ego, and the envy might be the small ego. You understand? That's transactional analysis, understanding how two structures work together. But I'm going to just explain to you structural analysis. It is extraordinarily, I cannot say this, it is extraordinarily important that you understand this process. Let's explain. Okay, so this is how we take an ego through the process of death in meditation. Yeah, you can try and do this outside of meditation, but it's much harder. It's much better if we have a good meditation. So that means that before we start, right here, because remember this is in meditation, yeah, we obviously should be relaxed. It's very important. As relaxed as we can. But let's do it. So the first thing that we have to do in observation of the ego is in a meditation. So we choose an ego that we're going to work on, whatever it is, it doesn't matter what it is, and what it needs to be is not a big ego, not a 7 capital sins. Yeah. It needs to be one situation, what we call a facet. It has to be a moment. I got into this argument with my wife today. Yeah. Or whatever it was last week. I had an altercation. I felt I felt unobserved by the barista today. I felt unobserved. He didn't acknowledge me. I'm a very regular customer here, and the way he gave me my macchiatto was just a little cold. Let me say, that was the coffee. Coffee was fine. That's not the point. And so that was it. Or whatever. Yeah. Or you're a man. You're working on today's lustful impression. You know what I mean? Today, walked, saw attractive girl. Double took. I looked a second time. Time to work, boys. Okay, so this is how it works, yeah? So you take it, and the first thing you do is you take that situation without judging it. So the first thing you must do in working on an ego, this isn't in the moment. I'll talk about in the moment in a minute. So I'm going to talk about how to use this process in meditation, then I'm going to talk about how to use this process outside of meditation, like when you're struggling with something right then and there. First, so you take that situation and you run it through the mind. You run it through the mind. So you go, okay, here I was. This is what I was doing. And again, no judgment. So I don't go, oh, you dirty, lustful thing, you. And then you looked, oh, you disgusting. You disgust me. I can't believe you did that. Oh, that's horrible. Oh, why would I even do that? I'm horrible. That's not how you do it. Or the same thing with pride. You try to do it and you go, yep, that was my pride. It was horrible pride. Here it is. Yeah, I just got to work on it, don't I? Oh, yep. And that's when I said that. Oh, that was horrible. You won't learn how to work on the ego properly unless you actually allow the situation to go through without any acceptance or condemning during this process. So your first thing you do is run the situation. And as you run the situation, you break it up. Samael talks about this again. This is all from Revolution Dialectic. So he says, you should break it up. So you should actually look at, in the 3 brains, look at first physical lotus center. What was I saying? What were they saying? Yeah. So what was said and what was done? Actions. So look at your own body, Look at your like your body. What do you call it? Body language. Look at what words were said. Look at what they said. Look at the reactions. Then the next two things: emotion and intellect. So emotion is what we call flavor. So there's a feeling. What was the feeling I was actually having inside myself? How was I feeling? Again, don't prejudge. Just try to get enough feeling, the flavor of the feeling inside. How was I feeling? And try to feel, what was that? What was that feeling? I was feeling like a little bit upset, a little bit, whatever. I had a weird feeling. As it with lust, it's weird. It's often when you go for the feeling of lust, it's actually like really kind of gross. Do you know? It's like, just like icky. Yeah, this feel. What was the feeling? The feeling was it's just and that's what I mean. So this weird feeling. Okay, that's what we call the flavor of the eye. Then intellect. What thoughts were going through the mind at that exact time? What was I thinking? When that person said X, what was mine doing? And what you're going to notice is as you go through this process, without accepting, condemning, just getting all the facts, just observing all the facts, you will actually start to build up an understanding of the actual ego. And it may be a different ego. That's what's crazy. It's like what Rich was saying before about helping someone and then realizing that you actually had a vested interest or something, and that you actually don't want to do it anymore. And then so when you actually go and look at the situation, what you'll often find, oh, wow, that was like a totally different thing in the background that I didn't even notice when I first started acting. And that's why it's so important that you don't accept and condemn in the beginning, so you can actually see this ego objectively. Because you might see, even in lust, you might see something else. Often I've gone to see a lustful impression. I've realized I was like really depressed before the lustful impression came. I was looking for something. You understand what I mean? And so there was actually this whole like self-compassion involved first, which is actually much more interesting to work on than just the little lust. So I can sort of crim the lust really quickly and then move on to this other ego because it's actually more interesting, not more interesting, but more important. It's actually taking up more energy than the other one. If I was feeling low for all day, I ended up going for sensations. You're working on gluttony. That's a beautiful one to realize how many other egos are involved. So again, the end of the observation process is finding the defect that we're going to work on in a deeper way, understanding the situation as much as I can, as much information as I can. Next, I then have to separate from this defect. It's very important. So once I've sort of found all this, like I've found all this anger, yes?
Without accepting or condemning,
yep.
You've been framing that for self. So I'm running through an exchange with you.
Both.
Great.
Yourself and the other person.
Great. I just want to really clarify that because I know for myself sometimes I could run a scenario where I'm quite able to not accept. I'm able to accept and not condemn myself, but I can quite easily condemn the other and not accept them in that scenario, and therefore justify my entire ego.
Yeah. To give an example, I remember talking to a friend of mine, and he was saying that had a very strong sense of justice. This is a Leo, they like justice, and he said to me once, he goes, "I'll work on it if I was wrong." So before even deciding, he's a Gnostic, obviously. Before even deciding he's going to work on the ego, he had to first ascertain if he was wrong. You're not doing it right. You're already working in it and accepting, rejecting, condemning psychology. You're trying to stay outside of that while starting. Okay. Hopefully this observation should lead us to a point of understanding then what ego we're actually working on. And that's very important. And then we should have a good profile. The flavor is very important for the process of separation. The flavor. In other words, the emotional flavor, very important. The feeling of the ego. Because I then must separate from it. The tricky thing about the ego is you did it because there is a part of you that wanted to do it. That's the hardship of the eye. Whether or not you didn't want to do it, like the guy, what is it, the guy who sells like someone a crappy car. That actually happened to me once. A guy sold me I literally had I had 2 kids at the time. And he went and he sold me a dud car. But he was a mechanic. He knew it. Because I remember when it broke, I took it to the next mechanic and he's like, "Oh man, this guy intentionally sold you a dud car. He sold you a Kia that had a time belt coming up. You're gonna pull the whole engine out to do that." And it was like one of those moments. And I remember his psychology. He was so self-loathing while he was doing it. He was like, "Oh yeah, no. Oh, it's a good car. A lot of people say it's not very good." But I could just see the pain in his body the whole time he was giving it to him. And when he gave me the keys, he was like, "There you go. And I could see, looking back now, I'm like, oh, he knew he was doing, like he knew he was actually hurting a family, but he couldn't get over the fact that he wanted the money so bad that he just did it anyway. It could be drug addiction, who knows? It could be all sorts of things, but he just couldn't not, he had to do it, and that's suffering. Yeah. I will tell you right now, it's actually that psychology that causes most of the world's problems. It's that sort of thing, I don't want to be a bad guy, but I'm going to ruin the entire world. I don't want to be a bad guy. Don't want to be a bad guy, but we're just going to bomb Yemen. You know what I mean? Not being a bad guy. That's what I actually respect about Trump. He actually doesn't mind being the bad guy. Yeah, we're going to go bomb Yemen. They had it coming. They're a bad country. They're a bad people. Blow them up. You know what I'm talking about. We're some of the best bombs. America's got the best bombs. Lovely bombs. Beautiful bombs. Blow them up. I like that. At least he's not bullshitting, like standing up there going, we're looking for peace. It's all about peace. We want to have peace, prosperity in our country for all nations and all people in the world. We love them all. Also, I'm initiating a war in Iraq. Like, come on, man. At least he's straight up. He's like, get him, boys. Blow them up. Oh, man. They're going to feel the full force of the American military. They had it coming. You know why? Because America's the best country in the world, unlike those bloody Middle Easterns. I love it. He just calls me. I love it. Whether or not you like him or not, it doesn't even end to it. You got to respect the definition of position. You know what I mean? Wonderful. Okay, so separation. So then I must emotionally separate from the ego. I can't die in an ego if I still have it. Otherwise, I'm literally putting a knife in myself. It doesn't work that way. While you still feel you are the ego, you can't really work on it. So if I'm trying to work on my anger towards someone and I can see now the anger, I've observed the anger, I can see the way it's working, but I still feel like, but I'm right. That person, I just don't want to let it go. It's their fault. Screw them. I'm trying to work on the self-compassion, but there's still a feeling. It's still like it's still got you emotion. Like, oh, poor me. My life is miserable. I hate everything. Oh my God. And I'm like, I want to die, but oh, my life sucks. That's not going to work. You must separate. As Raphael said, it's like you've got it like that. How are you going to die if it's like that? Or how are you going to die if it still is you? So you must then separate. So usually, if we're lucky, as I said, this can sort of happen quite naturally. When you see and observe the ego properly, you understand how it's really working. You often just go, ooh, and there's a sort of a natural separation there. But if not, we have to use the key of contrast in order to separate, meaning I have to find something to contrast the ego with in order to create that separation. I can contrast it with the beauty of the Divine Mother, with the being. That's a good one for lust. Lust is very hard because it uses the force of the sexual energy, meaning that it is a sexual desire, the most powerful force in creation. So you may not want to do it, but it's all just like, lust is like, yeah, but good luck going against that, mate, because this is stronger even than instinct. So, and you're like, but I don't want to. And lust is like,
we're going to anyway.
So you're going to do it anyway. So why don't you just, and that's how it feels. And so it can be very, very hard to create that separation. So we have to see that separation. So as I said, with the Divine Mother, we can sort of contrast. I can see that with lust, that my Divine Mother gets forced to commit all the acts that I do because she's within the sexual energy. And I can start to feel within myself some remorse for that. I don't want to do that to her. So I must dissolve this ego. That's separation. The same thing with the anger. If I have the anger, I can actually look at the pain it causes the other people. I look at the imperil that it does, blinding my clairvoyance, destroying my body. I can contrast, like, I don't want to be like this anymore. I actually don't want to. I don't care if I'm right. I actually don't even care if I'm right. I just don't want to be like this anymore. It's the thing we used to say all the time. Yeah? Just because you're right doesn't mean it's right. Yeah? Just to understand. So I have to find that contrast in order to remove that ego if it still has me emotionally, or if the logic is still very strong. It's feeling that I'm right, that it's okay, I can keep being like this. I have to create some separation. That's the second. So the third is comprehension. Now, honestly, most people stop here when they're trying to work on the ego in the normal life. Krishnamurti only taught up to here, and Samael thought that was it. So comprehension is where I need to try and take that defect through the 49 regions of the mind. Yeah? That's what I have to do. I want to take it as deep as I possibly can. I want to drop it right down like that and see how deep. And hopefully if we have this amazingly deep practice, we will take it to its depth. In other words, maybe that ego is rooted in number 18 of the mind, or it's rooted in 40, and we actually take it there. Who knows? Depends. If we do it properly, we will find the root of it. And so this process is a process of questioning the ego in order to gain that knowledge. So I'm literally questioning the I. And so Samael says to put the ego in the box of the accused, like the witness box, yeah? But not for the witness, the accused box, yeah? So the guy who actually did it. And we cross-examine, we question them like that. And we're questioning ourselves, really, but we're questioning that aspect of ourselves, that ego inside, which I've now separated, and I'm looking at it. So, and we start asking why. So, if we're working with the anger, we ask the anger why. Why are we doing this? What's the reason? What's the point? Why? And you will find the anger will give you an answer. The anger will say, oh, well, I have to do it because, if I don't do it, then I'm going to end up in this messy situation tomorrow, rah. And so you actually have to sort of slowly push down, like get rid of all of the fluff, because that's what happens is what you'll find is all this logic. When you actually start listening to it, you'll realize this ego is completely insane. If you know what I mean. And as you actually start going through it, it's like there's going to be like a layer each time. So one will be like, oh no, I don't want to do this, because I have to get angry because if I don't show a good front of anger or something, then it's not going. Then people are going to start walking all over me. So I got to do that's not true. And then you sort of push down. I actually don't want to do that. Why are we doing that? What is the deeper reason? And each time, hopefully, seeing if we can take it deeper. And what we're looking for is the logic of the ego. There is actually a specific logic at its heart. Yes. What does Raphael Arapé call the deep reason of the ego? Do you know what I mean? Or the deep logic or something? There's a term for it.
Samael said the deep significance.
The interior significance.
Yeah.
The deep significance of the ego. Yeah.
Apprehend the deep significance.
Yeah. I know Raphael often says something else like the true logic or something. He's got another word. Yeah. But yeah, the interior significance, the deep significance of the I. So there is a reason for its creation, and it has like a deep logic, and we want to try and unearth that. It is possible to dissolve the ego without reaching it. You can have such remorse and repentance that you're able to dissolve it without understanding its deepest interior, comprehending it to an absolute. It is possible, yeah, through enough repentance and wanting to dissolve it, but not having enough, say, intellectual understanding of it that we can still dissolve it. But we are trying our best here to really understand it, to really open it up and gain that depth of knowledge. Okay, so that's the process. Questioning the ego, trying to take it as deep as we possibly can, trying to find the real reason that it's coming, not the one that it gives you up here, but the real reason down here. And it could be something crazy. Yeah, the ego could just be like, I just love the sexual energy. I just love the flavor of losing it. I remember I was working on an ego of lust, and that was what it was. It was amazing. I was trying to find its deep significance, and then it was just there, and it was like a wine connoisseur or something. It was just like, I just love the taste. It was like that. It was like I just love the feeling, just the release, and it was like that. I just love the release, so nice. And I was like, wow. So he gave me all these reasons, like it's like you hear these reasons. It's like what I saw when I was. So I'm subscribed to my own YouTube channel. I have my own separate YouTube channel, YouTube account, but I'm obviously subscribed to the Gnostic one that I put things on. And so when I drop a new video, it goes on. But I was watching one of the new videos, sort of making sure it was all good. And one of the things that came up in the sidebar with related videos was how many orgasms should a man have every single day to remain healthy? I was just like, what? But I know people who feel like that. I teach them the alchemy, and they're like, "Mate, I'm going to explode. You can't do that. I'm going to blow up. It just can't be done." And they believe that. That's actually a logic within the ego. And some guys like straight up believe that. I'm going to blow up, mate. I'm like, come on, mate. Or that. Oh, it's good for your health. It's like when you try to teach people to start slowing down, to get off alcohol in order to gain some control of the consciousness. And it's like, no, I need it for my health. I need a bottle of wine every day for my health, So, but that, as I said, that's like an up here logic. But as you go down deeper, you're going to find something deeper. Okay, as you question the I. Okay, so once we have some depth, some understanding that we are happy with, Because it can be hard. Some egos will require multiple practices to try and go really deep into them. Then we must have some feeling of remorse. Yeah? Which is the need for death, the feeling of remorse. If there's no feeling of remorse, then it's not going to go deep. The piercing fire of the Divine Mother won't really penetrate into it unless there is some remorse. So we must try and muster some remorse from within ourselves.
So, like that point you get to is like, I just don't want to be like this anymore.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Now, if the practice has been done mechanically, which is very easy to do because, life is long and everything's difficult and we're tired and we work and, the sufferings of being an adult, right? Then we can do the practice mechanically, meaning we can sort of do this process, but just sort of sit there and be like, all right, yep, watching it. Yep, that's an ego. I hate egos. They suck. All right, yep. Separate that separation because I don't like egos. So that's easy. And comprehension, okay. And then you've got a whole warehouse in your head of all the stuff Raphael's ever said. So you're like, the deep meaning of self-compassion is it happens to me and not others. Yeah, I'm feeling that way. It does happen to me, not others. That's how I'm feeling. Okay, remorse. Yeah, I don't really want to be self-compassionate anymore, but I do feel horrible. And crim. Oh, it didn't work. But that's seriously, it's very easy to do that. If you're doing if you're just sort of doing it mechanically every single day, it's very easy to do that. Very, very easy. But obviously that's not what we want to do. So we want to try and feel that need for death. You have to really feel that inside of ourselves, really feel that remorse. Yeah. And repentance means repentance implies a bit of atonement. Do you know what I mean? Remorse is just a feel, but repentance requires some level of atonement. So actually feeling something, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. I actually want to change my way of acting because I don't want to do this anymore. So there's some atonement there as well. Okay. Again, there can be some contrast there. I can look at the what it's doing to myself, others, etc., etc. So it's like, yeah, we can contrast again for that if we want to.
Did you say repentance is like remorse in action?
Sorry?
Did you say repentance is like remorse in action?
I understand what you mean. Yeah, you can say that. Yeah, repentance implies a level of action. You know what I mean? Yeah, remorse. See, in English it's tricky because the word remorse, you can have remorse and do nothing. It's technically speaking. Do you know what I mean? Just feel really bad. Whereas repentance sort of implies actually going out of your way to try and to actually reconcile or fix the situation as well. He was repentant, meaning he actually was going out. He was actually doing something to change, as opposed to he felt a lot of remorse, which basically means I felt bad. Okay, so dissolution, the part that is easily forgotten by Gnostic people. After this whole process and feeling like we've done a good job at understanding it, we sometimes forget that without the force of Divine Mother, it will not dissolve. Just end of story. It just won't. It's in the mind. Otherwise, we're just observing our mind, and we're just like any other person on Instagram, being like, if you don't want to feel bad, just don't feel bad. That's the same thing. You know what I mean? What was that one? I saw it was wonderful. She just goes, I mean, if you're homeless, just buy a house. And so someone did like a whole song to it. You're homeless, just buy a house. What was it? If you're if you're sick, just get better. If you're it was just like a whole song like that. If you're sick, just get better. He said, if you've lost your legs, grow new ones. It was like something like that. It was just like showing all these pictures of people in just like terminally situations. If you're gonna die, don't. It was just like, it was marvelous. It was such a good example. But in the end, if we're just sitting there in the mind, I know it's cruel, but we're not really that much better than the TikTok pop psychologist. So come on. We need prayer. We need the Divine Mother. That's what separates us from them. Yeah? The others. Okay. That's a joke. The others are like horror. Anyway, don't worry about it. It's a horror movie. So dissolution. So we then ask the Divine Mother to dissolve this ego, to finish with this ego. And we actually see her in our with our imagination, which is a power, and see her dissolving and that defect actually burning. So we personify that defect. We see it with the imagination as something, and we see it burning, you know what I I know often when I work on pride, it just personifies as me. Some egos, when I personify them, because I don't always necessarily have to think about what they are, it just sort of comes up. I think of lust, this sort of weird beast starts to form in my mind. I ask my Divine Mother to dissolve it. But every time I'm working on pride, I ask the Divine Mother to dissolve it. I just see like it just shows me where I'm meditating. I just see the spear just go straight through me, just like that. I remember the first time I tried to dissolve pride, and I tried to personify, and it was just me. I was like, wow, okay, it's the ego that thinks it's me. So the dissolution. So we see it burning. We can work. There's a really lovely mantra to help us focus, which is the mantra Krim, which we can ask the Divine Mother while we're doing it. As we see that fire dissolve in the ego, as we see her spear piercing that ego, we can use the mantra Krim in order to concentrate that energy. And that mantra Krim is for her sacred fire, so it helps a lot. That's the process of death of the eye, done in meditation, what they call structural analysis. Yeah. If there's multiple egos, Samael says you stop and you do it for each one. So if you're working on the ego and you suddenly realize that there's two egos, as an example, pride never works on. Anger never works alone. It's always defending another ego. So if you're working on anger, get ready to do two practices, because you will always have to dissolve another ego. There'll always be something else behind it, usually pride. Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to explain to you is, how do you then do this in the moment? Because there are 3 times to work on yourself, right? You can work on yourself before, during, and after the event. Mostly we work after the event. So it means if I am, how do I put this? If I am working upon myself, I'm usually doing it after the effect. So I've already made the failure, I've already made the mistake, whatever, and now I'm sitting in meditation later in the day trying to understand. But as you start to work on yourself and you want to dissolve these egos, you're going to start, like when you do a death practice, and that ego, you get some understanding of it. Because of that observation and comprehension, you're probably going to start noticing it much sooner, and you'll actually be able to work on it in the moment. And so, for instance, it may manifest in the mind. You may fail during. So you're trying to work on that ego, and then it's coming, that anger is coming, and then and you say it like, and then as it's saying it, you're watching yourself being like, what am I doing? So that still ends up being after, because you work after again. During is when we actually have to start observing ourselves while we're doing it and trying to see. So we're mostly just working a little bit, but we're mostly just working with these. Yeah, I'm trying to understand the ego. I'm not trying to get deep comprehension in those moments. I'm not sitting there being like, why am I doing this? What is the profound significance? Because usually we're dealing like with a person, with a thing, with a situation, or lust is there with its slimy little hands all over you going, you know what I mean? Feel something weird, and you're going, what is it? It's like Arlof used to do all the time. The Emperor, do it. I can't do it. He does it so well. He do it. I can't say it. The Emperor, the Emperor in Star Wars. He goes, oh no, Arlof nails it every time. He just goes, do it. I can't do it. It's just him sitting there, In other words, what he's saying is, do it, kill him, move to the dark side. That's lust, Do it. Look. Yeah, that's right. Waste your time. Open up your phone. Look at those dirty images. Yeah. But you're struggling, you're suffering, you know what I mean? Or if it's in the alchemy, do it. Ruin the practice. That's right. Become obsessed with the body, you sick thing. And all of that, right? Yeah. You start to try and work. What you're doing here is you're trying to observe the ego in the moment and separate from it. And as I said, because you're working in the moment, you're not doing this whole accepting, condemning to the same degree that you would in a meditation. You can now feel it. You've got this thing inside of you, and you're trying to separate from it. So really, you're spending a lot of time. You can already see it. You're trying to separate from that defect in the moment. So as it's coming to you, like, mate, and you're trying to. You can work with the Divine Mother. You can say, Divine Mother, help me. Help me separate from this defect. Show me this defect. And then, depending on the situation, if we're dealing with a person, we can't do the comprehension right now because we've got to talk to them and deal with them. But then when we have that next moment of separation, but like say, for instance, we're driving the car, we're being attacked by a defect. If we manage to get that separation, then we can move straight into this process. And this process is, again, quite similar to how we would do it in meditation. You know, if I'm driving like that happens to me a lot. I'm doing a long drive, you know, like 2-3 hours or something, and an ego comes up, just comes up. I have some beautiful ones. You know, there's the one, obviously there's the lust one where you're just driving in. Lust is just like, lost all thoughts. And you're like, oh, come on, man. And you're driving. It's like 3 hours. You're like, oh, come on. You know? And so, yeah, you know, you try to separate from it, and then you try to observe it in the mind as you're driving. You try to understand it, try to gain as much comprehension, and then you're there driving. Cream. Fantastic. Or it can be, yeah, I have a beautiful one. I get like full on like anger fantasies while I'm driving is the other one. That's another big problem. You're driving, and then it's like the mind just starts going, mate, if I had to deal with that guy again, oh, he was the worst. You know, next time I would just like kill him. Yeah, that's right. I just get him in a headlock and beat him to death. That's a great idea. And then you're like, that's a bit dark, isn't it? It's a bit dark, you know, or whatever, you know, or you're just having the console, having arguments, winning arguments. You don't usually get to win them, so you get to win them in your mind. You're like, yeah, good job, all this sort of stuff. And so, again, if you've got time, then you can, and you manage to separate, then you can start doing this right away. If we're in the moment, we're with a person, then we're going to have to wait until we walk away to actually then start to do it. But it's really, really, really good time, yeah? And this is fantastic. This is where you got to be careful because the mind is really tricky. So you're trying to, let's say, for instance, you've got an egotistical situation, you're dealing with somebody, you're getting upset or whatever, and then you manage to stop it. So when you're dealing with them, you actually manage to separate from that ego as it's coming in. You know, you're there, you're going to get into an argument, or you're going to have a problem, or you're going to whatever, pride, whatever, and you manage to separate. And then you finish with that conversation and everything, and then you go, all right. And before you go do your next thing, you think, I might just sit down for like 5-10 minutes and just try and clean that up, and just clean my mind up. Go to the toilet, it's a good spot. Everybody loves sitting on the toilet, but you don't bring your phone. Dum, dum, dum. What are you going to do? I'll tell you, you're going to work on that ego. Yeah. So you sit down and you work on the eye, and you sit there, you know, yeah. And you can even multitask. Maybe you need to take a poo. That's a good one. And you sit there and you observe the eye, and you're now taking it through these processes here. So you're trying to understand it. And now this is very important because, again, this is where we can be mechanical and lazy, because we may be able to separate from a defect in the moment, but then because of the sort of daily life, we then don't take it deeper. You know, so, and this is a common problem. You know what I mean? So even though I know I've got to work on, etc., and even I managed to get that separation while I'm dealing with the person, and then I go, oh, I've got to get back to work, or I've got to go shopping, or I've got to look up nonsense on my phone. You know what I mean? Oh, that YouTube thing. Yeah. And so instead of now taking it to the next level. Yeah. And so before, so that's during. Working on yourself before, that's a tricky one. Working on yourself before is actually going through this process before entering a circumstance. So if you're going to deal with somebody, and I actually do this quite a lot. Sometimes I have to do someone, it happens to me a lot as a Gnostic instructor that I have to, oh, sorry, that's the wrong way to put it. People will come to me looking for, say, intimate advice, complicated situations, etc. Now, sometimes they just call me. I got no idea. That's fine. But sometimes they like set it up. Mick, can I meet you in half an hour? Or can I have a conversation tomorrow at 12 or something? And so often what I will do is I will make sure inside of myself, because sometimes, you know, you may have an inkling that person's got an issue or something, and you're like, you know, someone's going to put a big emotional issue onto me. Do you know what I mean? And you get that little bit of resistance, like, oh, man. It's going to be a really emotional. I know. If you're a really emotional person, maybe you don't care about emotional stuff. But I don't know. Sometimes when someone comes up with an emotional thing, you know, you go, oh, I don't want to have that put on me, etc., etc. Whatever. So there's resistance in the mind. I will work on it beforehand, and so often I will even work on something, even if there's nothing there. So someone says, "I'm going to talk to you tomorrow." I sit down and I go, "Is there any resistance to that person?" Oh, there's a little bit of resistance. Okay, I'm going to work on that. Otherwise, if you don't, it becomes that situation you were talking about before, where I'm giving, but each time I give, there's 10% of a bit of annoyance or feeling like, you know, and then he starts saying that thing, oh, I just give, and you just take, you know? Oh, you Gnostic people, you just come and ask Gnostic questions. You never say, how you going, Mick? You never say, you having a good day, you all right, Mick? You never ask how was work? No, you only want Gnostic answers, don't you? Of course, that's what they want. Well, how did I get here? By not transforming impressions, idiot. Not transforming my self-love, yeah? Or even, it's just such an absolute niggle. Like, you know, like it's in that circumstance, I'm literally being asked to do my job and then I'm getting upset. You ever been to a workplace and you ask someone to do something and they give you a huff and puff, even though that's their job? I remember we had a dishwasher. This is ages ago, back in Lemuria, you know, when I was like 17 working in a cafe.
In Lemuria?
Yeah. It's a joke, a long time ago. And 17 years ago, mate. But I remember I was working in this cafe and we hired a dishwasher, but she was really, really entitled, really proud. And I remember she walked out once. She used to always walk out the front constantly. She didn't actually want to be the dishwasher, but she really wanted to work at that place. And so she just kept coming. Then she'd always just come outside constantly. And it's like, you're the dishwasher. You never leave the back. The waiters bring the stuff in and you wash it and then they take it out. Like, you actually never leave. That's the way it works, yeah. And she used to keep coming out the front and flirting with the barista, etc. Who was the only other straight guy there. Because it was an entirely lesbian cafe that I worked at. A very odd situation, that one. How I came to work at an entirely lesbian cafe. And so was all the clientele. It was a very strange situation. Hawthorne, Adelaide. But anyway, yeah, I remember she kept coming up. And I actually remember, because I was sort of manager, I said, look, you know, Tess, you've got to go back in there and do the dishes. And she goes, doing the dishes isn't in my job description. And I said, you were hired as a dishwasher. It is your only job description. Like, it's the only thing in your job. And she's like, oh. It's just, she had the exact cutting it out. Anyway, yeah, so interesting times. But yeah, so that's it. That's how you work on the ego. Before, during, after, but also this process is actually very important to understand and to put into activity. Very, very important. Yeah. And so, as I said, it can be done in the moment, but I still recommend meditation. It's very important because there are whole schools of gnosis out there, unfortunately mostly started by the Master Ravelou, one of Samael's most successful students. Ravelou had a completely awakened consciousness. And because of this, he had a really clear mind. And so he always worked on the ego in the moment. And what he did, what you call muerte mancha, which means death in motion, or just dying in the moment. And he said, all meditation should be done for awakening consciousness, and death should never be done in meditation. And of course, you need to have a balance. There should be a balance. You should be doing practice of awakening, and you should be doing practice of death, of course. You understand? I see the exact same thing happen. If people do only death practices, they end up completely mental. Yeah, they become. They use a term in this South American gnosis. They call it a yoista. Yo means I, and ista is like a. It basically means a person who's obsessed with the ego. You can't say egoist in English because that's already a word, but it's kind of like an egoist, an egoer. I don't know. You become completely obsessed with the I. It's important to awaken at the same time, because if your consciousness isn't awake, this process just becomes a moral process and just becomes a mess. Yeah. But yeah, as I said, we need to do this in meditation, but also we need to be doing a level of definitely doing observation and comprehension in our daily life as well. It's very important to do both. I say that because honestly, most of the people I found who use the muerte mancha thing, or the fact I'm doing the death in motion, I found that like 90% of the time when someone says that, it's just because they don't like meditating. It's like just 10 out of 10. Oh, I just die in the moment. Means what? I don't like meditating. That's usually what that means. It's like a cop-out. Do you know what I mean? That's right. It's a little, yeah, it's like, oh, well, you know, are you going to die? No, I just do them once a month. Okay.
Oscar's Scannity, he has a pretty hard word on the death in motion.
Yeah.
Yeah, he says, like, he basically describes how, like, it's absurd. He describes it like how you just described it, like it's for, like, non-identification and separating.
Yes.
So you need to, exactly what you said. He's like, this is absurd to think that you can just do this.
And he'd be dealing with that a lot.
Yeah.
Because he's dealing with a lot of South Americans, because most of their movement didn't really make it here. Their movement came through the Beelzebub guy and completely and utterly failed. So
What most of
no, I'm saying is in Ravalu's students, New World Order, Ravalu's students, a lot of them, the only institution that was from his line was technically Beelzebub stuff, but it wasn't even really, and it completely failed here. So basically, what I'm trying to say is there's not a lot of people like that in the Western world. Then we're too much a doctrine style people,
Yeah.
Whereas Oscar's going to be dealing with that a lot, because there's tons of South Americans who are just in love with that psychology, because it means that basically you can get away with doing nothing. Super easy to do nothing, but just go, oh, I die in the moment. Let's go to a breath death practice. No, I'll die in the moment. Okay. So, yeah, of course.
There's a book out at the moment called Let Them. Do you know about it? Let Them Theory?
No.
Which is basically where you would react before. You just let them.
Okay.
And then you concentrate on your side of the net about what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Right? So, but then, and I can see how that also applies really in big time in this. However, if that person's actions are having repercussions on you, say their family, and they keep doing it, and you can work on yourself all your life, but they're still going to keep doing it, and let them may be quite hard. So,
that's a tricky one, because you see that psychology is tied to the psychology of the degeneration of our planet, which is that do it thou wilt from from Aleister Crowley. That's just another. Let them just the same. It's just a reimagining of you do you. You do your thing over there, and that has been shown to be historically inaccurate. Everyone said, oh, let's just allow. I know I should cut this out, but everyone's like, oh, let's just allow, homosexual marriage. It's going to be fine. And now they're pushing transgender marriage and all this stuff, and now they're pushing pedosexual. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, well, if we kept in line way back, maybe things would be better. Do you understand what I mean? But it's the idea if I just let it go a bit, if I let everyone do their own thing, it doesn't affect me. That's complete nonsense, because we live in a completely interconnected society. Everything that we do affects everything that everyone else does. Even if you don't help, if you're not part of society, your withdrawing and selfishness also creates a vacuum of not helping, if you understand what I mean. You know what I mean? Like, as in, so I'm
say you set the boundary.
Sorry?
Say you set the boundary, it doesn't work, and then you decide you're not having more to do with them.
Yeah.
That happens in life for some people.
Right? But
then you go back to your ego and you go, well, did you really need to go that far?
What you need to do is actually observe the problem inside. Because that's what I'm finding. A lot of this sort of stuff, again, it's like, it's this sort of, this is all, I refer to myself as pop psychology. It's popular psychology, you know what I mean? And the problem with the popular psychology now is, one, it's all self-affirmation. Self-affirmation is a problem in Gnosis because it's all based in pride. But the thing is, you're not comprehending anything in that process. You're just going, oh, I don't want to deal with that person because they're bad. That's it. Like, I was talking to a person recently, and they're having an issue, and they just start saying, oh, that person's a narcissist, which is just the new blanket statement for not dealing with somebody.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, they're a narcissist, so I don't have to deal with them anymore. And I'm like, but what you actually need to do is actually look deeply inside yourself and actually examine your relationship with the person properly and see what it is that your relationship is based upon. So, for instance, if I have a relationship with some person that's based on mutual self-indulgence, then it's not a good relationship, right? Yeah. So I actually need to then look, is there a way I actually need to look at the relationship. You know what I mean? What is the foundation of the relationship? Because if the foundation of the relationship is purely egotistical, my ego and your ego and feeding ego, then sure, maybe we just need to finish with that relationship completely. But like with family, it's a bit trickier, because you've actually got to look at it and go, okay, well, is there more there? If there's not, then you can just walk away. But you have to actually look, because you may have their responsibilities, like walking away, for instance, from a family member, for instance, like a father or a mother or a daughter, or that's got karmic repercussions. So there has to be a very good reason to do that. You understand what I mean? But like, as an example, like my aunt, who is like just genuinely. In fact, all of my family, apart from my dad and mum, are just like devils. They're just the worst. They're just, and So my mum's side, they're all like Russian, sort of semi-Russian, just materialists. They don't really want to have a relationship with me. And so that's easy. I basically see them once every 2 years. Super easy. They don't want to see me. I remember once my mum was feeling, oh, you should go see Roxana. She's your auntie, la la la. And I was like, Mum, I said, she doesn't want to see me. I don't want to see her. She, oh, that's horrible that you'd say that. And then she literally went to see her and she told her I said that. And you know what Roxana said? She goes, no, that's fair. She goes, I don't really mind. You know, I don't mind if I basically never see him. And she came back and told me, oh, it's funny. That's crazy. What you said about Roxana is completely correct. She doesn't want to see, she doesn't really mind if she sees. She doesn't hate you. She just doesn't mind. And I'm like, yeah, neither do I. But then my dad's family, I like my aunt, who I was extremely close with when growing up, used to go spend every summer holidays with her, has now gone. She's completely sold out to the whole woke thing. So she's basically been at university in various courses for like, you know how people do that for like 10 years or something. Now she's moving to social working, and and she's like that. It's like she comes around every time I even try to have a conversation with her. She's just shoving down my throat trans stuff, gay stuff, everything she can. And it's like our relationship, there's actually nothing there anymore. So we just don't talk to each other because there's just nothing. There's actually nothing to maintain. We don't have any love anymore. There's just nothing there. And so like you always want to work with the highest part of a person. But if like with her, there's actually nothing for me to do. She's so completely brainwashed by that whole stuff. And it's not like a case of like, it's just that if I go anywhere near her, she brings it up. Do you know what I mean? She's a Gemini, I'm an Aquarius. She wants to have an argument. And so I just don't want to. And so I've tried going around there not having an argument, and she just keeps going, pushing for the argument. So in the end, I just don't go there anymore. But on the other hand, it's like it can be tricky. It's like if you've got a father who's sick and you're the only person who can, you know what I mean? Then you're just going to have to go there. And you're going to have to see inside, but you have to see inside. What you need to do is remove from inside yourself the part that gets upset. So I could actually technically go to my aunt's house all the time. She lives in Sydney now, but she was local recently. I could actually go to her house all the time, specifically with the mission of actually dissolving from within myself all the judgments and everything about her and being able to sit there calmly and just deal with her. Do you know what I mean? But in that circumstance with everything else, kids and that, it just wasn't worth it. Yeah, exactly. I didn't see any positive. There was no karmic thing. I just walked away and nothing seemed to come of it. But that's why it's tricky. So you've got, I feel like it's this. That's why, that sort of stuff's messy because you never know. I feel like you really need to go inside and look at it. Look deeply at the reason for it. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's what it really comes down to, Gnosis. It's like really observing deeply, like what is it that person's bringing to me? What am I bringing to them? What's actually the nature of our connection? Oh, Axiom. Night has passed and a new day has arrived. So gird yourself with arms of light. That's a pretty straightforward one. I like that one. That's a nice one. It's one that just makes you feel good, huh? And in other words, the difficulty has passed. So now is the time to work with force. Do you know what I mean? I love it. In prediction, obviously it talks about the death of the ego. Usually this means you need to die in the ego. That's like 9 times out of 10. It's like you need to die in an ego. But it can mean like a changing of a situation as well. But like 9 times out of 10, this means you need to die. You get this, it's usually like you need to sort something out. You know, it's like you need to die in that situation. You know, like you'll see the other cards and it'll be like you need to die. It'll be in the answer, it's like whatever, this process, this problem, this thing, you need to die in yourself. That'll be the answer usually. You need to die psychologically, not physically, you know. Yeah, the Bonds had a crazy practice here where they would make you, the old Tibetans, they had a practice where like either you die to the whole ego or you die physically. That's it. They put a person as a ritual, and either the person is defined to dissolve the whole ego in that one moment or they die physically. It's crazy.
Another practice Oscar said about the same mob, he said that they would have they would put the disciple into the practice of the alchemy with like a priestess or something, and then there would be like a guardian or something with an axe outside.
Oh, I know this.
And if he spilled even one drop,
they close that up. That's from Samael.
Yeah, that's from Samael.
I know that one, yeah.
Yeah, that's why they have the bones, the necklace of bones and stuff like
Yeah.
But they're white magic.
Yeah. Samael thought they were black magic for a long time, but they're just really extreme about the death of the eye.
It's heavy, man.
Yeah, it'd be awkward for the lady too, you know. He just has one little spill and that's it, and suddenly she's covered in blood. Okay, come on. Let's make a little circle and we do a wee practice.